It was the year 2450, and humanity had just been accepted into the Galactic Union. After centuries of exploration, war, and survival, humans had earned their place among the stars. But despite their new status, they were still considered outsiders. The other species in the Union were old, wise, and technologically advanced. They had learned to live in peace with each other for centuries, and they didn't always understand the newcomers, the humans. The humans were loud, bold, and full of surprises. They had a way of doing things that no one else could quite understand. One day, an unexpected message arrived from the Galactic Command. It was an invitation. The message was brief but clear. The humans were invited to join in the Galactic Game Night. This was an annual event, a competition that brought together the best minds and most skilled individuals from each species in the Union. The games were meant to be fun, but also a way for the species to show their abilities and intelligence. The humans had never been invited before. In fact, most of the species in the Union didn't care much for human traditions, so why were they invited now? What had changed? Commander Sarah Davies, the leader of the human delegation in the Galactic Union, stared at the message with a mix of excitement and confusion. She couldn't help but feel proud. This was a big deal, but at the same time, she had no idea what to expect. The games were known to be tricky, and the galactic species were incredibly skilled. They had been playing these games for centuries. Could humans really compete? She gathered her team and read the invitation aloud. The room fell silent as they listened carefully. The tone of the message was formal but welcoming. The Galactic Command had clearly put a lot of effort into making it sound exciting. The Galactic Command invites you to participate in the upcoming game night. The message said, "Join us and test your skills against the finest minds of the galaxy." Everyone in the room exchanged uncertain glances. They had never heard of any human ever participating in something like this before. Why would the Galactic Command want them there? Was it a challenge, or was there something more behind it? Commander Davies knew one thing for sure. The humans had to be prepared for whatever was coming. "We'll do this," she said, her voice steady. "This is our chance to show the galaxy what humans can do." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Commander Davies and her team worked tirelessly to gather everything they needed. The humans had their own unique set of skills and creativity, but they didn't have the centuries of experience that the other species had. They needed to be ready for anything. The team worked on strategy, studied the different species they'd be competing against, and practiced as much as they could. But despite all their preparation, no one really knew what to expect. As the day of the event drew closer, the anticipation grew. The humans were excited but nervous. They knew this was more than just a game. It was a test of their abilities, their creativity, and their intelligence. But why were they being tested? Why were they invited? The questions were starting to pile up in their minds, but no answers came. The day finally arrived. Commander Davies and her team boarded the transport ship that would take them to the Galactic Command Center, a massive space station that floated in the heart of the galaxy. The station was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was enormous, with towering structures and strange designs. It looked more like a city than a space station, with ships coming and going, bustling with activity. The humans had never seen anything like it. They were about to enter the heart of the Galactic Union, and the thought was both thrilling and terrifying. As the transport ship docked, they were greeted by several representatives from the Galactic Command. The beings who stood before them were nothing like humans. There were tall, thin creatures with translucent skin, their bodies shimmering in the light. There were short, stout aliens with round eyes and thick fur, their voices low and rumbling. And there were others who looked almost human, but with small, subtle differences, like skin that changed color depending on their emotions. It was clear that no two species were alike, and the diversity was both fascinating and overwhelming. The humans knew that this was the moment that would define their place in galactic history. They had come so far, and now they had to make sure that the games and the ideals they represented would survive. They weren't just fighting for victory in a single game. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. They wanted a future where cooperation and innovation, not tyranny and control, were the guiding forces. The first move was made by the humans. They broadcasted a message across the galaxy, inviting all species, regardless of size or power, to participate in the final challenge. It wasn't just a game. It was a statement. The humans were asking the galaxy to come together, to embrace a new vision of what the future could be. They called it the Galactic Challenge, a test of everything the humans had fought for: unity, creativity, and the willingness to collaborate across boundaries. At first, there was silence. The galaxy was holding its breath, waiting for the command's response. But then, something incredible happened. One by one, species from all corners of the galaxy began to signal their participation. The Zarian, the Drenari, the Kreth, species that had once been divided, ignored, or oppressed by the command, began to join forces with the humans. It was the beginning of something much larger than anyone had anticipated. The Galactic Command, watching in disbelief, tried to intervene. They threatened sanctions, they promised severe punishments, but the galaxy had already spoken. The people were no longer afraid. The humans had done what the command thought was impossible. They had united the galaxy in a common cause. The command could no longer control the narrative. The final challenge was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't just a test of individual skill or technology. It was a test of what the galaxy could achieve when it worked together. The games were designed to push the limits of creativity, strategy, and teamwork. Each team had to navigate complex puzzles, solve riddles that tested not only their intellect but their ability to cooperate, and overcome challenges that forced them to think in new ways. It was a celebration of what the galaxy could achieve when species stopped fighting each other and started working together. The Galactic Command, realizing they were losing their grip on power, made one final attempt to stop the games. They sent their most powerful enforcers to disrupt the final challenge, to sabotage the event before it could reach its conclusion. But even this, the command underestimated. The human-led alliance was ready. They had anticipated every move, every potential setback. The sabotage was foiled, not by force, but by the collective ingenuity of the teams. The command's attempts to interfere only served to strengthen the resolve of the participants. In the end, it wasn't just the humans who triumphed. It was the galaxy as a whole. The final challenge was completed, and the result was a victory not for one species, but for all of them. The Galactic Challenge had shown the galaxy what was possible when species worked together, when they put aside their differences and focused on a common goal. The Galactic Command, defeated, had no choice but to acknowledge the result. They could no longer hold onto their position of absolute authority. The games, and the ideals they represented, had changed everything. The command could try to restore order, but the galaxy had already been transformed. In the wake of the final challenge, the galaxy entered a new era. The humans, who had been banished from game night, had not only proven their worth, but had also changed the course of history. They had shown the galaxy that intelligence, creativity, and unity were the true sources of power. The Galactic Command's monopoly on control had crumbled, and a new chapter began. The galaxy was no longer defined by a single entity or force. It was a place where all species, regardless of their background or history, had a voice. The games, once a symbol of exclusion, had become a platform for collaboration and innovation. The humans, along with their allies, had proven that even in the face of adversity, the power of unity and creativity could overcome the greatest obstacles. The galaxy had changed forever, and it was clear that the humans had played a pivotal role in that transformation. They had proven that the future didn't belong to the powerful or the mighty. It belonged to those who dared to dream, to challenge the status quo, and to believe that a better future was possible. And as the last of the final challenge's participants celebrated their victory, they knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of a new, brighter future for the galaxy. The game began. The teams took their positions, and the challenge was set into motion. The human team, led by Commander Davies, quickly assessed the puzzle. The other species around them, tall, wide-eyed beings from distant stars, seemed to be strategizing in a way that suggested they had faced similar puzzles many times before. They knew how to approach the obstacles methodically, step by step. But the humans did something different. They ran into the maze with no clear strategy at first, with no plan to follow the traditional route. Instead, they used their creativity. They tried different things, testing every corner of the puzzle and laughing as they made mistakes. But with every misstep they learned, the aliens who had expected an easy victory looked on in surprise. Their calm, methodical approach was being challenged by the humans' boldness. Commander Davies noticed the shift in atmosphere. It was subtle at first. A quiet murmur among the aliens, a few raised eyebrows. She could feel the tension growing as the human team pushed forward with their unusual tactics. They didn't follow the rules. Instead, they bent them. They explored every possibility, every angle, no matter how strange it seemed. It was something the other species had never considered: human unpredictability. One by one, the human team members began solving riddles that the aliens had struggled with. They hacked through the maze in ways that didn't follow any expected logic. The other teams started to feel uneasy. Was this just luck? Or was there something more to these humans? As the game moved into its final stage, the human team was ahead. They had almost completed the maze when a loud voice echoed through the hall. The leader of the Galactic Command, the tall, blue-skinned alien, spoke again, but this time his tone was different. It was almost cold. "The game will end soon," he said, his voice commanding attention. "But remember, this is not just about winning. It's about understanding each species, and the final round will test you all in ways you have never been tested before." With those words, the game took a sudden turn. The maze shifted, the walls began to move, and new obstacles appeared. It was as if the game had changed on its own, responding to the human team's unexpected moves. The creatures from the other species started to panic. They weren't prepared for this. They hadn't anticipated that the maze would change based on their actions. The humans, however, seemed to thrive in the chaos. Commander Davies couldn't help but notice how the aliens were reacting. The calm, confident faces of the other species were starting to crack. Their carefully honed strategies were falling apart in front of them. The human team was creating chaos, disrupting the system the aliens had perfected over the centuries. And the more the humans succeeded, the more the other teams seemed to struggle. In the final moments, Commander Davies and her team managed to solve the puzzle. The room fell silent. The human team had won. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. The humans had defied the expectations of every other species in the room. The audience, a sea of different faces, stared at the humans in disbelief. The silence stretched on, and then, finally, the blue-skinned leader spoke again. "You have won," he said, his voice softer this time. "But this is only the beginning. There are more games to come, and we are watching." The human team exchanged uneasy glances. They had done well, but there was something unsettling about the leader's words. It wasn't just a win they had earned. It was something bigger. And the more they thought about it, the more they realized that the Galactic Command had been testing them in ways they hadn't even fully understood yet. As the games continued, the human team found themselves winning round after round, each time facing more difficult challenges, each time shocking the other species with their unexpected tactics. But with each victory, the humans couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. They were being watched, studied, and tested in ways they couldn't fully understand. It was clear now that the Galactic Command wasn't just interested in who could win these games. They were interested in something else, something far more important. And as the human team prepared for the next round, Commander Davies couldn't help but wonder, why were they really invited to this game night? Was it just about winning, Or was it about something much more dangerous? As the rounds of the galactic game night progressed, the humans began to sense that something wasn't quite right. Every victory they achieved seemed to bring more eyes onto them. The alien species that had initially been curious about the humans' participation were now whispering amongst themselves. The games that had started as friendly competition were slowly turning into something darker, more serious. And the humans, despite their growing success, couldn't ignore the feeling that they were being watched, closely, carefully. Commander Davies couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered in the air. Every time the humans succeeded in a challenge, the room fell silent, with the eyes of the other species on them. At first, the aliens had been surprised by the humans' quick thinking and creativity. But now, with each victory, that surprise seemed to shift into something else, something darker. There was a sense of growing tension, an unspoken discomfort that the humans couldn't ignore. The next game was a test of strength and skill, a physical challenge where teams had to work together to lift and move massive objects, all while solving puzzles under pressure. The humans were ready. They had trained for this, and their teamwork was impressive. But as they began to solve the puzzles and lift the heavy objects with surprising speed, they noticed something strange. The other teams, aliens that were far stronger and more experienced, began to falter. Their movements slowed. Their actions became less sure. Something was off. The humans weren't just performing better than expected. They were dominating the challenge. It was as if their unpredictable style, their willingness to take risks, was throwing the other species off balance. But this time, there was no applause. No cheers of admiration. The silence that followed their victory was deafening. Commander Davies felt the eyes of the room turn toward her, and she knew something had shifted. The leader of the Galactic Command, the tall blue-skinned alien, stood at the front of the room, his glowing eyes fixed on the humans. "We need to speak," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "Come with me." The human team was led to a quiet chamber, away from the prying eyes of the other competitors. The air felt thick with tension. The blue-skinned leader, whose name was Kyrek, motioned for them to sit. His gaze never wavered, and for the first time since they arrived, Commander Davies could see something she hadn't noticed before. Concern, maybe even fear, in his eyes. "Your performance," Kyrek began, his voice lower than usual, "has been unexpected." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "You humans are unlike any species we've encountered. Your creativity, your ability to adapt so quickly, is unlike anything we've seen in the Galactic Union." The room fell silent. The humans were used to being underestimated, but this was different. There was an edge to Kyrek's tone, something that suggested their victories weren't just impressive, they were a threat. Commander Davies spoke up, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you mean by that?" Kyrek's eyes narrowed. "You're not just competing in a game. This is a test to see how you would react under pressure, a test of your ability to think outside the rules. We've been watching you." Commander Davies felt a chill run down her spine. "A test?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What kind of test?" Kyrek stood up, walking toward a window that overlooked the vast expanse of space. "You see, we've never allowed humans to join the Galactic Union, not until now. Your species is too unpredictable, too chaotic. You don't follow the same rules that the rest of us do. And now we see that this unpredictability could be a problem." The humans were stunned. They had assumed the Galactic Union had accepted them out of a sense of unity, of mutual respect. But now it seemed their acceptance had been more of a calculated decision, one made to test their abilities, their creativity, and possibly to understand if they posed a threat. "Why are you telling us this?" Commander Davies asked, her voice steady but filled with confusion. Kyrek turned back to face them, his glowing eyes full of an emotion the humans couldn't quite place. "We wanted to see if you would reveal your true nature, if you would break the rules in ways that could shake the foundation of the Galactic Union. And you have." The human team exchanged nervous glances. They had never meant to break anything. They were simply playing to win, using the talents and skills that made them unique. But now, it was clear that their victories had raised questions, doubts, even fear in the minds of the galactic leaders. The other species are afraid, Cyrus continued. Afraid of what you could do if given enough time. Afraid that your creativity and unpredictability could disrupt the balance we've worked so hard to maintain. If we allow you to continue, there's no telling what kind of chaos you might bring. Commander Davies felt a lump form in her throat. Are you saying we're a threat? Cyric's eyes softened, but only slightly. Not a threat, but a potential threat. Your ability to break the rules is something we can't ignore. And it's something the other species will never understand. They've spent centuries developing their strategies, their ways of thinking. And you've come in and changed everything. You've made them question everything. The humans didn't know what to say. They had come here to compete, to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. But now they realized that their success wasn't just a victory, it was a danger. What will happen now? Commander Davies asked quietly. Xeric hesitated. The other species want you gone. They want to ban humans from any future game nights, and if you continue to disrupt the balance, they may even ask for you to be removed from the Galactic Union entirely. The words hit like a blow. Commander Davies felt her heart race. They had come so far, and now it seemed like everything was about to fall apart. She could see the uncertainty in her team's eyes, the same fear she felt growing inside her. But there was one thing she knew for sure. They couldn't give up now. They couldn't let fear control them. The humans had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and they weren't going to let anyone take that away from them. We won't back down, Commander Davies said, her voice firm. We're not here to disrupt. We're here to prove ourselves. We belong in this union, and we won't let anyone take that away. Cyrix looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then you will face the consequences of your actions. The decision is not mine alone. But you should know this. Your victories have changed everything. With those final words, Cyrix turned and left the room, leaving the human team to consider their next move. They had won the games, but now, the real challenge was just beginning. They had to fight for their place in the galaxy. And it wouldn't be easy. The next few hours were filled with uncertainty. The human team sat in a quiet room, their minds racing with what they had just learned. Everything they thought they knew about their place in the Galactic Union had changed. They were no longer just competitors in a friendly game. They were now viewed as a threat, a species whose creativity and unpredictability had unsettled the very foundation of the galaxy's peaceful order. Commander Davies paced back and forth, her mind running through every possibility. She had never imagined that their success in the games would lead to such consequences. At first, it had seemed like a simple competition, an opportunity to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. But now, it was clear that their participation had deeper, more dangerous implications. Commander, what do we do now? Asked Lieutenant Jack Harper, one of the team members. He was pacing with her, his face tense. We can't just sit here and let them throw us out of the Union. I know, Commander Davies replied, her voice steady but filled with frustration. But the other species, they're not going to just forget what we've done. They're scared, Jack. And when beings like that are scared, they act out of fear, not reason. But we didn't do anything wrong, Harper protested. We were just playing the games the way we know how. We didn't break any rules. If anything, we showed them what humanity can do. We've earned our place here. Davies nodded, but the doubt in her mind lingered. I wish it were that simple, but this is more than just winning a game. This is about control, about power. The Galactic Union has been built on a set of unspoken rules, and we shattered them. We don't fit in with their perfect, orderly system. We're not predictable, and that scares them. The team fell silent as the weight of the situation settled in. They had accomplished so much already, and now it felt like it might all be slipping away. If the other species truly wanted humanity gone, how could they fight back? What could they do? "Commander," said Sergeant Mira Lopez, another member of the team, "we can't just give up. This is our future, our people. Everyone back home are counting on us. We have to find a way to make them understand that we belong here." Commander Davies stopped pacing and turned to face the team. There was fire in their eyes, a determination she hadn't seen before. Despite the fear that gripped her own heart, she could feel the strength of her team. They weren't ready to give up, and if they weren't going to quit, then neither was she. "We'll have to fight," she said, her voice firm. "Not with weapons or violence, but with what makes us human. We'll show them that we can be part of the Union without tearing it apart. We'll prove that our unpredictability is our greatest strength, not a weakness." The team nodded in agreement. They were ready to fight, but they knew it wouldn't be easy. The Galactic Command wasn't going to back down just because they wanted to stay. They had to find a way to make the other species see the value of human creativity, the power of their unpredictable nature. That night, Commander Davies gathered the team together in the command center. The room was filled with screens, data streams, and communication channels that connected them to the wider galaxy. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was how they would approach the next phase of the challenge. "We need to show the Galactic Union that we're more than just a wild card," Commander Davies said. "We have to prove that we're an asset, not a threat. And we can't do that by playing by their rules. We have to be smart. We have to outthink them." Lieutenant Harper raised an eyebrow. "How do you mean, Commander?" "We have to turn the game around," Davies replied. "We've already shown that we can break the rules. But now we need to use that to our advantage. We'll challenge the very foundation of the games. We'll show the other species that the future of the Galactic Union doesn't need to be as rigid and predictable as they think." Sergeant Lopes spoke up, her voice steady. "We'll have to play smarter, not harder. We'll need to convince them that our way of thinking can work for everyone. If they can see that we're not trying to destroy their system, but to enhance it, maybe they'll change their minds." Commander Davies nodded. "Exactly. The next round of games is critical. We need to take control of the narrative. We need to show them that humans can bring something new to the table, something that will make the Union stronger, not weaker." The human team spent the next few days preparing for the final round of the games. They practiced, strategized, and studied the previous rounds in more detail than ever before. But this time, their focus wasn't just on winning. It was on sending a message. When the day of the final round arrived, the atmosphere was different. The Galactic Command's leader, Surek, stood at the front of the hall again, but his expression was colder this time. There was no welcome, no excitement. The other species sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the human team, their judgment clear. The challenge for this final round was one that no one had ever faced before. It wasn't a game of strength or strategy. It was a test of unity, a test of cooperation among the species. The teams were asked to collaborate, something that seemed impossible, given the diversity of the species involved. Each team had to work together to solve a puzzle that would require everyone's unique abilities. The catch: no one could complete the puzzle alone. The human team looked at each other. This was it. This was the test. They weren't just up against the clock. They were up against the entire galaxy. The other species would never trust them. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. But the humans knew one thing. They had to find a way to work with them. They had to show the other species that humanity wasn't just a threat. They were a part of something bigger. Commander Davies turned to her team. "We're going to prove that we belong here. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. We'll show them that our creativity can bring us together." With that, the final round began. The tension in the room was thick as the final round of the Galactic Games began. The human team, gathered together in a tight circle, exchanged determined looks. This was their chance. The challenge before them was unlike any they had faced so far. It wasn't about winning for themselves anymore. It was about showing the galaxy that humans had a place in the Union, a place where their creativity, unpredictability, and ability to unite could contribute to something bigger. Commander Davies stood at the front of the team, her eyes scanning the vast hall. The other species were already gathered with their teams, each one brimming with confidence. There was no question in their minds that they were superior. They had centuries of experience and had followed the rules to perfection. But the humans had something they didn't, something that made them different. And now, they needed to prove it. The challenge was set up on the main floor of the hall, a massive, intricate structure that stretched high into the air. It was a puzzle, but not a normal one. This was a collaborative challenge. Each team had to work together, combining their different skills and abilities to solve a complex problem. No one could do it alone. They had to cooperate. Commander Davies knew this was their moment. She turned to her team. "Remember, we've done this before. We've adapted, we've created, and we've worked together to solve the impossible. Now we need to do it with them, everyone in this room. This is not just about us. It's about showing them we can be part of something bigger." The human team nodded, their faces filled with resolve. They had been under pressure before, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just their reputation on the line. It was the future of humanity in the Galactic Union. Xerek, the blue-skinned leader, stood off to the side, watching. His glowing eyes never left the humans as they prepared to begin the task. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his body was clear. He knew this was the moment that could change everything. The challenge started with a loud signal, and immediately the puzzle began to unfold. The teams had to move massive sections of the structure into place, but the pieces were heavy and complex. Each piece needed to be carefully aligned, and there were no instructions on how to do it. Each team had to figure out their approach. The human team was the first to start, their minds working quickly. They didn't hesitate. They took charge and began moving the pieces with confidence. But as they worked, they realized the other teams weren't just observing them. They were watching every move, waiting for the humans to fail. The humans had never been welcomed with open arms. Now, they had to prove themselves even more. The first hurdle came when the pieces of the structure began to lock into place, but they weren't fitting correctly. There was a problem with the alignment, and the human team couldn't figure out what was wrong. For a moment, panic set in. The other species had already started to make progress, and it looked like the humans might fall behind. Then something remarkable happened. Lieutenant Harper, the team's expert in engineering, noticed a small detail that the others had missed, a tiny mechanism that was off by just a fraction of an inch. It wasn't a flaw in the design. It was a test. A challenge to see if the humans could solve something that no one else could see. "Wait," Harper shouted. "It's this part right here. We need to adjust it just a little bit." The team gathered around, quickly working together to fix the issue. It was a simple fix, but it required creative thinking, something that the other species weren't prepared for. They had all been trying to solve the puzzle with the same old methods, relying on their decades of experience. But the humans had a different approach. They weren't afraid to break the mold, to try something new. With a few swift adjustments, the piece slid into place. The human team cheered, but their celebration was short-lived. They knew the other species were still watching, waiting for them to make a mistake, but they didn't back down. They kept moving forward, working together with the other teams. Over the next few minutes, the puzzle began to come together. Slowly, one piece at a time, the structure took shape. The human team was no longer working alone. They were collaborating with the other species, showing them how their creativity and unpredictability could be a strength, not a weakness. The final piece of the puzzle was the hardest. It was a massive, heavy section that required every team to lift and move it into place. The humans had done most of the work, but they couldn't finish it without the help of the other species. It was the moment of truth. Commander Davies stepped forward, her eyes meeting those of the other leaders. She knew that if they were going to finish this, They had to trust each other. She extended her hand to Xirik, the leader of the Galactic Command, who stood with his team at the far end of the puzzle. "Let's do this together," she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. Xirik looked at her for a long moment, his glowing eyes searching her face. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, he nodded. He walked over to the human team, and without a word, he reached for the final piece. Together, the humans and the aliens moved the massive piece into place. It wasn't easy. It required every ounce of strength, cooperation, and trust. But as the piece clicked into place, a wave of light surged through the structure. The puzzle was complete. The room erupted in cheers. The other species, who had been so certain of their superiority, were now applauding the human team. The victory wasn't just about finishing the puzzle. It was about the journey they had taken together. It was about showing that humanity could be a part of something bigger, that their creativity and unpredictability could be used to enhance the galaxy, not disrupt it. Xirik stepped forward, his expression softer than it had been all competition. He looked at Commander Davies and nodded. "You have proven yourselves," he said. "You have shown us that there is more to the universe than just order and control. Your unpredictability, your creativity, is a strength. The Galactic Union will never be the same." Commander Davies smiled, her heart full of pride. They had done it. They had earned their place in the Union, not by following the rules, but by breaking them and showing that there was another way. As the human team celebrated their victory, Commander Davies knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had learned what humanity could do, and they were ready for the challenges ahead. No matter what came next, they would face it together, as a part of something much bigger than themselves. The human race had taken its first step into the stars, and they weren't going to stop now.